Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. It's been about 10 days. I took yesterday off, so technically 11, but 10 days for me. And my character is shaping up rather nicely. I'm having a lot of fun with her this season. If you're unaware of what particular character I chose to build a Ice Maiden. A pure Ice Maiden, too, one of the first of its kind. Up until the Thunder Charms, it was kind of impossible because, well, a pure Ice Maiden was incapable of killing the majority of the cold monsters in the game. However, with the addition of the Sunder Charm, we can now finally kill all those cold immune monsters. In fact, I'd like to demonstrate that real quickly just by going up and killing Eldritch, who is always cold immune, by the way. So if we were to go up here and kill Eldritch, you will notice that I can pop him rather well with relative ease in Hell difficulty, mind you. Granted, this is Players 1, but in Players 8, I can also do this. It just takes me a little bit longer. And you might be asking yourself, well, how did I manage to pull this off? What kind of equipment am I using? How did I make a character who can utilize the Sunder Charm so well? The Sorceress, the Cold Sorceress specifically, can do it very easily, but how does the Ice Maiden get it done? Now, originally when I first started, I was utilizing a very wonderful item called the Wizendraw Bow. It is a very low-level item, and it has a pretty massive negative 35% enemy cold resistance on it. And I was utilizing that in addition to other items to get my cold resistance, or my negative cold resistance, up as high as possible. This allowed me to get my negative cold resistance up to a massive negative 53%, which is pretty insane. However, I did eventually start to obtain the runes so that I could make myself a specific rune word called Ice. Ice has negative 20% cold resistance on it, which is not as much as Wizendraw's negative 39% when it's socketed. However, it does have other very nice effects, like the Holy Freeze Aura, which add to my cold damage, as well as the increased attack speed, the ignores target's defense, the life steal, the percent cold skill damage, and so forth and so on, which all add up very nicely to equal a very fun weapon, which can dish out some pretty serious amounts of damage. Now, the Wizendraw is still technically the better bow for fighting cold immunes. So when I am fighting a cold immune, despite the fact that it has less damage, the Wizendraw is the higher damage item specifically for those cold immunes. Now, cold immunes are not all over the place. So, like in most situations that matter, the ice bow is going to out DPS them. However, when I'm fighting cold immunes, I will actually dish out more damage with the Wizendraw than I would with the ice bow. And that's just due in part to the fact of the massive negative cold resistance. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, how did I get the massive negative cold resistance? It doesn't just come from the bow. I'm also getting it from other sources. So I had to take a lot of, ideas and try and figure out exactly where I was going to get the rest of my negative cold resistance. And as of right now, I'm running negative 34% with the ice bow. And to do that, I have an Arcane's Valor with a perfect 5/5 in it, facet, gold facet. And I'm also using Crown of Ages. Now, Nightwing's Veil would be the better choice if I was fighting non-cold immune monsters, but because I wanted to balance out the killing capacity of those cold immunes with my killing capacity for the, obviously the non-cold immunes, I decided to go with the Crown of Ages because I could put 2 cold facets in it. Whereas if I were to go with something like a 3-socketed helmet, I could put 3 cold facets, but I would have no plus to skills. If I went with the Nightwing's Veil, I would have +2 to skills and 1 cold facet. So Crown of Ages is my middle ground in between the two to give me the 2 cold facets with the +1 to skills, which helps me keep my damage up, but also gives me more negative res. And this is important because I need the negative res to counter the cold immune monsters. If I don't have it, I can't really get the damage output for those cold immune monsters. I'm not worried about the monsters that are non-cold immune because I do tons of damage to them. I'm worried about the monsters that are cold immune. Arcane's Valor, again, was chosen because I needed an armor that would allow me to put a facet in it. While Chains of Honor would be a far better choice for my resistances. As you can see, I have very poor resistances. It does not allow me to add any additional negative res. So I chose a +2 armor that would allow me to add additional negative res, and Arcane's Valor is it. There are very few other armors in the game that are +2 to skills that also allow you to add a socket and put a facet in there. In fact, the list is pretty short. I'm pretty sure it's just Arcane's Valor, actually, unless you're a specific class that has like a very specific skill set. Like there is, of course, the Shadow Disciplines on the Gnat's armor, which is 3 sockets. There's defensive skills on the Griswold's armor, which is 3 sockets, and so forth and so on. But there's nothing that's +2 all skills and also allows you to have an additional socket. And by utilizing the Crown of Ages, the Arcane's Valor, and the Ice Bow, I was able to hit a pretty healthy amount of negative res, enough to take care of most of the immunes. I'm also utilizing a decent amount of increased attack speed so that I can hit a specific breakpoint. I have the Nosferatu's Coil, which is 10% increased. And I'm also using the +3 bow and crossbow, 20% IASs to get the extra damage and also hit that breakpoint. So between the 20% on the bow, the 20% on the gauntlets, and the 10% on the belt, I am hitting a 9 breakpoint. So 9 shots per... I can't even remember that. I think it's 2.77 shots per second or something. I can't even remember. Also using Ravenfrost for the Cannot Be Frozen and a Mana Steel ring with all resistances. I need to get myself a better Mana Steel ring, actually. I'm eventually going to be replacing these with Gore Riders. I'm fairly certain. I just need to get my resistances fixed first. And obviously I'm using a lot of bow and crossbow skillers to increase my damage even further, as high as I can possibly get it, with the Cold Sunder, of course, consuming one of those slots. I did manage to get myself a torch, which was very, very nice, an 1118, and also Uber Diablo got spawned the other day, and so I was able to get myself a 1610 Annie. As far as my charms go, I actually have kind of a mix mash of charms. Generally, a lot of resistance ones to make up for my horrible resistances, and also I'm looking for any kind of resistance charms I have that have +2 cold damage. One thing that a lot of people don't know about Ice Arrow is that the Ice Arrow actually absorbs cold damage from all targets and adds it to the explosion. On my skill panel here, you see that my damage is 3,954 to 4,092. So when I place this cold charm in my inventory, you notice it goes to 4,111 because the 19 damage is being added to the explosion. And this, in fact, actually multiplies out any cold damage that I get even further. So eventually, I would like to get my hands on as many cold damage charms as possible. In fact, I'm not even sure if it's possible, but I'll have to take a look and see if maybe I can get +1 bow skillers with cold damage too, because that would be probably the best outcome that I could possibly get, because +1 bow skillers with cold damage would add even more damage to my freezing arrow, which would multiply out even further. As for skills, I have basically 1 point in Magic Arrow, Multi-Shot, Guided Arrow, and Strafe, and that's just because it's kind of stupid to have an Amazon that doesn't have Guided Arrow, at the very least. Guided Arrow is just an absolutely excellent ability, and I have Strafe specifically for those situations where I might want to proc effects. Maybe I'm trying to proc Amp, maybe I'm trying to proc Frost Novas, maybe I'm trying to proc something, maybe I'm trying to steal mana. As far as a skill goes, Strafe is one of the best in terms of that because it fires 10 arrows for 1 shot, and each one of those arrows can pierce up to 5 times, which means that you potentially have a total of 50 additional hits, which can, of course, steal mana, steal life, and obviously proc effects. So it's interesting to consider Strafe, even if you're not a physical boson, because Strafe is absolutely excellent for those purposes. Guided Arrow is absolutely excellent for obviously hitting targets when you might not otherwise be able to, and great for killing Ubers and like Pandemonium Diablo and so forth and so on. As for the actual main skill, I have beefed up Cold Arrow to 20 to get the full bonus for the skill. Obviously, I beef up Freezing Arrow to get the full bonus for the skill. And I didn't beef up Ice Arrow until later. I actually realized later on that I really wanted to build Ice Arrow for the additional cold duration. And the reason why I wanted that extra cold duration is because I was utilizing it for crowd control. In Ubers, we actually did quite a few Ubers recently where I was able to freeze pretty much everything in the Uber zone and lock down all of the minions so that my team was able to very, very safely take on the Ubers by themselves. I could freeze the pit lords. I could freeze everything except for the ghosts, and the ghosts actually died really fast because ghosts, of course, are immune to the freezing effect. So I did eventually drop 20 points into Ice Arrow to enhance that freezing effect of Freezing Arrow. Now, Cold Arrow is actually kind of a garbage skill that doesn't work very well unless you have physical damage. Ice Arrow doesn't really work very well at all, to be honest. I don't even know why Ice Arrow exists except for the 19.6 second freeze duration. It does less damage than Freezing Arrow, and it does even less damage than Freezing Arrow because it doesn't have an explosion. So while Freezing Arrow will dish out your melee damage and whatever damage that you have to the target and then also explode, Freezing Arrow only dishes out that cold damage directly to the target and doesn't explode, which is where Freezing Arrow and Ice Arrow just really kind of separate. Freezing Arrow is definitely the main skill that you use as an Ison, and Ice Arrow and Cold Arrow just kind of get ignored. As for the rest of my points, I definitely put 1 point in a crit. There's no reason to overdo that, especially since Ice Bow has 20% Deadly Strike on it. And I'm not really a physical damage character anyway, so it doesn't really matter all that much for me. Penetrate wasn't really needed all that much for an Ison, just simply because, well, she doesn't really need very much attack rating. She has decent attack rating already, but she really doesn't need anything higher. On top of that, the explosion goes off whether you hit the monster or not, so it doesn't even really matter. On top of that, the Ice Bow ignores target's defense on it, which pretty much means that I don't have to worry about attack rating for the majority of the monsters in the game. The only monsters that it ignores target's defense doesn't work for is bosses, champions, and elites. So everything in the game that's not a boss, champion, or elite, I can hit, literally without any trouble whatsoever. As for the bosses, champions, elites, yes, I have a little bit of an issue hitting them with the physical attack, but it's not really that big of a deal. The explosion, the nice little ice explosion, does a very nice amount of damage. And usually in those situations, if I'm fighting one of those bosses, I'll be using Guided Arrow for the crushing blow, the open wounds, and the deadly strike. Pierce, on the other hand, is a very important component of this particular build, and because I was unable to utilize the Razor Tail, because I needed the extra 10% increased attack speed from Nosferatu's Coil, I've actually dumped quite a few points into Pierce, and I may actually put more into Pierce because the higher that Pierce is, the more damage my Freezing Arrow does. So getting that as close to 99% or 100% as I can is very important for this build. Also, to accommodate the fact that my resistances are very low, I've also put 5 points into each one of the dodge, avoids, and evades, and it has made a huge difference in my survivability on this character. I also have 1 point, of course, into Inner Sight, Slow Missile, and Decoy, and Decoy I use on a regular basis. And I've also made sure to beef up the Valkyrie to level 17. Now, the reason why I beef up the Valkyrie to level 17 is because, well, the Valkyrie gets her good weapon at level 17. That's when she gets her last gear upgrade, and so having her at least at level 17 makes a big difference in her damage output and her survivability. All in all, this build has been absolutely amazing, and I've been having so much fun playing on this particular character. Whenever I come across densely packed monsters, no matter what they are, I just have so much fun burning through them. Sometimes I'll switch back and forth between my Wizendraw and the ice, and recently I've created a harmony so that I can get around faster. I don't necessarily have an Enigma, which I don't really run Enigma on my characters for the most part anyway, but what I do have is a nice harmony bow, and the harmony bow allows me to run Vigor, so I can get around much faster when I need to, and that way I can run directly into the combat, get in here, maneuver around a little bit, cluster them up, and then switch to my ice bow and just start annihilating. Now, grotesques are normally ice immune or cold immune, so I'd like to kind of show you guys just how well I can kill these grotesques that are cold immune, and I can show you this by removing the Cold Sunder charm. You can see that they are indeed cold immune. And very neatly and very nicely, I can annihilate the grotesques now with the very nice amount of negative res that I have. So basically what's happening is the Cold Rupture Charm is setting the monsters to 95% cold resistance. I, of course, have negative 34% enemy cold resistance. So that is what? 95 minus 34. So we have 4 minus 5 is 1. And then we have 3 minus 9 is 6. So we're looking at 61%. So any cold immune monster that I come across is sitting at 61% resistant to my damage type, which is enough for me to basically just annihilate them. And the way that Freezing Arrow works is it multiplies the damage by the number of monsters that are nearby. I could run my damage numbers and try and figure out exactly how much damage I'm doing right now to give you guys an idea. But you know, it's interesting to see that even the cold immune monsters that I would have had a lot of trouble with before, I am able to literally just blow through. So let's do some calculations real quick, and we'll have some fun with this. Let me go back to town here, and we're going to do some quick calculations and figure out what my damage output is at this particular moment. All right, so got my calculator up. We got our damage panel up, so let's figure this out. We're going to assume a couple different scenarios. So the first scenario we're going to assume is one monster by himself. And we're just shooting that one monster. So we have 4,111 plus 3,962 is about 8,000 divided by 2 gives us our average damage of 4,036.5. We also have to add our other damage to it, so we're going to clear this. And we're going to add 611 plus 974. We're looking at about 1,085 divided by 2, so that's 792. We also need to know how much physical damage we have, because we do have, of course, Deadly Strike. But let's ignore that for right now, because it's not that big of a deal. It's only a couple extra damage. So we need to add this to our previous number, so 4,036, so plus 4,036. So if I'm firing at a single target by himself, I'm looking at 4,828 damage per shot, which is not actually too shabby for a single shot, although it could be a lot better. Now, the interesting thing is that I can multiply this by 2 if I fire at a target that's near a wall. So this is actually something that a lot of people don't know about Freezing Arrow, is that Freezing Arrow applies its damage every single time it explodes, even if it explodes on like a wall or something like that. So let's say, for instance, I was fighting Travancore Council, and one of the council members was near a wall. I can shoot the monster near the wall, and it will hit him, and it will explode once. And then when it hits the wall, it will explode a second time, dishing out 2 times the amount of damage to that target. For instance, with this particular guy right here, who's right near the wall, if I fire at the wall, it will explode twice, dishing out double damage. And I can utilize this effect to my advantage to get 2 times on a single target as well. So in those situations, if I am able to finagle a 2 times scenario, my damage goes up even further. And instead of 4,828, we are instead looking at, oops, wrong window entirely. We are looking at Bink. Another 4,036, so plus 4,036. So we were looking at about 8,864 per shot. Now, the interesting thing is that this doesn't even really mean much. Single target damage is not this character's strong suit. Single target damage is just what we do when we're fighting a single monster. However, when we're fighting a pack, this is where things get really interesting. So 4,036 is the explosive damage to everything within that radius. We can pierce up to 5 times, so if we take our 4,036 and we multiply it times 5, we are capable of producing 5 of these explosions at any given time, for a total of about 20,000 damage per per arrow. These explosions can hit multiple targets, and this is the beautiful thing. So if you have everything nice and clustered together, which does happen a lot actually, you can get 5 pierces and hit everything within that area. Now let's say you're fighting the cows, and there's about 30 cows all nice and clustered together, and you hit 5 pierces within those cows, and each explosion hits all 30 cows, which is actually possible depending on how nice and clustered they are. You're talking about a total of 20,000 damage times 30 for a total of about 605,000 damage. And of course, plus the average damage of our physical attacks, which was 792. So 792 times 5, so plus 792 plus 792 plus 792 plus 792. Did I get that right? Maybe one more, 792. And we're looking at around 609,360 per arrow. Now, of course, I could fire 2.77 arrows per second because I hit the 9 breakpoint on this particular character, which means that I can dish out this 2.77 per second. So times 2.77, which is about 1.687 million damage, give or take here or there, basically per second is what I can dish out with this particular character. If that's not impressive, I don't really know what to tell you. It's very, very fun to play this character in big, giant groups and crowds. The bigger and the more dense the crowd is, the more damage that I do, to the point of absurdity. And that's just the way that this particular character works. If you want to build this character, she's a very fun character to build. She's a very fun character to play. Crowd control is her name. Crowd control is her game. I mean, she literally can lock down a group of monsters like it's absolutely nothing. A random flying scimitar just making tons of noises in my ear. One of the most fun things is to go into like very tightly packed areas like the cows. But what I really want to show you is a very tightly packed area like the tombs. And just how ridiculously fast she can take out an entire group of monsters like that. Like a lot of the times when you open the doors in the tombs, and this is not like pre-scripted or anything, I don't know what's in here, but a lot of the times when you open the doors, there's just tons of monsters on the other side. And you just wait for them to gather up on the door, and you fire 1 arrow, 2 arrows, and literally everything within range of the explosions is dead. And then, of course, you come in and you fire a couple more arrows. But, like, when it comes to this particular character, she's so good at cluster farming that as long as you're making sure to hit those nice shots that literally go through multiple targets, the more targets, the better, obviously. And the more clustered they are together, the better. The more damage that your arrows do. And shooting at 1 target by itself is almost a waste with this particular character, because you want to target like those massive groups. And of course, this is P1, and so P1 isn't the most amazing thing to show off this kind of ability with. But I have plenty of videos out, plenty right now, where we have done P8 cows, not even just P8 cows, but P8 cows terrorized with level 96. Because I am currently level 94, so we would literally make the game. They're level 96 cows, they're level 98 champions, level 99 elites, and we are just burning through them like nobody's business. Because when they cluster up real nice like that, I can just fire off arrow after arrow, just dealing massive amounts of damage to the crowd. Now, of course, the more spread out they are, the less damage I do. The closer they are clustered together, the more damage I do. And of course, I constantly change positions, because one of the things that you have to do on this particular character is you constantly have to make sure you're changing your positions so that you have the optimal shot. You don't want to just shoot at 1 target. You want them to group up, fire 1 arrow in real nicely, and kill all of them. A lot of the times what I'll do is I'll use a decoy like this, and then I'll fire at the decoy, killing everything around the decoy, because they'll be nice and clustered around the decoy for the explosions. In fact, decoy has pretty much been like my main bread and butter for this particular character, just simply because, well, having them nice and clustered like that just really makes it work out nicely. And the Harmony Bow, which as you can see I have on now, has been absolutely excellent for this particular character to get around faster. Normally with these type of characters, you just don't really have the run walk speed to move around as quickly as you would like to. But with the Harmony Bow equipped, I can pretty much just run around and do whatever I want to. The most impressive thing so far has literally been the absolute ease which I dealt with the Uber area. Now granted, I wasn't specifically killing the Ubers, but in the past it's been very difficult to do any kind of Uber content on characters that use a single element, because there are so many monsters in there that are immune to those elements. But in this particular case, I was having a blast in there, just absolutely annihilating everything with my freezing arrow. And the other very interesting thing that is to note about the freezing arrows on is that even if you don't outright kill things, the monsters are frozen. You are the king. I mean, the absolute king of crowd control. If you can't freeze them, you slow them down. If you can't slow them down, you still slow them down, because with the Ice Bow you have Holy Freeze, and with the Nosferatu's Coil you have an additional 10% slows target by, which means that all the monsters are getting very nicely slowed down for you, even if you're unable to freeze them. You shatter bodies, which means you're very easily capable of farming Nihlathak. The monsters around Nihlathak are immune to cold, and you can still kill the monsters relatively easily. I've actually had a lot of fun going through here and farming Nihlathak, especially because Halls of Pain is also a very nice, dense area full of just tons of very nice dense packs that you can literally just like round the corner and you just, oh, okay, here's like 3 or 4 of them right up against a wall, and you just fire your arrows and everything dies. And they love clustering. They are absolutely, just a lot of these monsters in here absolutely love to cluster. And of course, firing at the walls gets you the extra damage. This works for not only for freezing arrow, by the way, the firing at the walls and getting the extra explosion. It works for freezing arrow, it works for exploding arrow, and it also works, believe it or not, for lightning fury. So if you are a lightning fury's on, an exploding arrow's on, an immolation arrow's on, or a freezing arrow's on, the explosion that results from shooting the wall will work for all of the characters. I've many times utilized that extra wall hit to get an additional damage on my Javazons as well as my freezing Arizons, and it is absolutely excellent. I don't really think there's a lot more to go over, so I figure I'll probably just kill Nihlathak real quick just so that you guys can see how it works. Maybe I'll find a cool rune or something while I'm on my way. Hopefully I get myself a D key. And if you were wondering how I know exactly where Nihlathak's throne room is, no, I'm not cheating. I actually, there actually are some map variations. So if you want to look that up, I actually do have a video on how to find Nihlathak every single time to know which path he's on, all of it, so that you can farm him with absolute ease. And right now, I'm going to go find which direction he's in. And he is this way. This is the correct direction right here. Pew, 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 pew. Look, I ain't got time for none of y'all snakes. Alright, just calm it down. All you guys, calm it down. Oh, ghosties. So ghosties can't be shattered. And that is a downside. So when there are ghosties here with Nihlathak, I try to be careful not to stand on the ghosty side. Usually what I do is I just kind of blind fire into the room here. Dish out as much damage as I can. Get as many of the monsters over here to this side as possible. After I feel like I've done a pretty good amount of kills, just kind of like off the screen here, I usually go around to the other side. That way any of the bodies that kind of gathered on that side are on the, are on that side, and I could be on the opposite. shatter those guys. Is Nihlathak already dead? Looks like I might have killed him just with firing my shots in there. Which, you know what? It's actually not uncommon for that to happen because, quite honestly, he's very densely packed in the middle of his group of monsters, and the freezing arrow goes in, does all those really nice explosions, and there is quite a few times where Nihlathak has just died from the explosions of the freezing arrow, which another bonus. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little recap on my character for Ladder Season 2. For those of you who were interested, who wanted to know more about my Ice Zon, I hope this has answered your questions. If you have any additional questions, feel free to ask them in the comments down below. Be sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button if you like my videos. And as always, keep watching.